of my favorite preachers is David Ring. David Ring, if you've ever heard him preach, you know he is very difficult to understand because David Ring has cerebral palsy. And when he preaches, and I say this in no way to mock him, but he sounds like this. My name is David Ring. Every word is a labor for him. But when he preaches, powerful. His testimony, when David Ring was a boy, he lost not one, but both of his parents to cancer. And growing up as a boy with cerebral palsy, you can imagine what the other kids at school said. You walk funny, you talk funny. David Ring said that when he was a boy, when he was 14 years old, he was so discouraged, so depressed, so despairing of life that even though he was a believer, he was considering taking his own life. He was contemplating suicide. His life was so hard. And he said he was laying there in his bed in the dark in his bedroom one night, 14 years of age, and he was thinking about specifics about how he might actually do this, take his own life, when he said God came to him that night in his room, and God spoke to him, not out loud, but just in his heart. And David said that he heard God say this to him: David, I love you. David, I made you, and you are so special to me. David, in fact, David, I have a plan for your life. David, I have a purpose for you. I want you to be a preacher. And David said that he spoke back to God, and he said, but God, I walk funny, I talk funny. And God said, that's okay, because I will be with you. My power will be made perfect in your weakness. And so David Ring, in this act of incredible obedience and faith, he went off to Bible college and he became a preacher. And now David Ring has literally traveled around the globe, preached to hundreds of thousands of people, seen thousands of decisions for Christ underneath his preaching. One of my favorite stories about David Ring. David Ring one time was with another preacher, and they were going into Canada. They were at the border. And they were in the line there at the customs booth, and the customs agent was apparently having a pretty bad day. He was being pretty rough with everybody. The other preacher got up to the border, and the customs agent looks down at him, and he says, "What do you have in that box?" And the preacher said, I've got some tapes. He had some tapes of his sermons that he was going to sell. This was several years ago. And the guy said, "Well, how many do you have?" "Well, I don't know." "Well, count them up." And he's just being pretty gruff, pretty rude about it all. And eventually this other preacher got across the border, and eventually David Ring got across the border. And when he did, the other preacher said to him, he said, "Wow, that guy got up on the wrong side of the bed today, didn't he?" And David Ring said, "Yes, he was mean." David Ring said that when he got up to the border, this customs agent looked down at him and he said, "What do you have in that box?" And he said, "Video tapes." He had some videotapes of his sermons that he was going to sell. And the guy said, "Well, how many do you have?" "I don't know." "Well, count them up." And David Ring said there's like 100 people standing behind him in line. So David Ring says with a twinkle in his eye, "Suddenly my handicap got worse." I started to count. 1, 2. The man screamed at me, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Hey, now you made me lose count." I love this guy, man. And he just goes through life with this fierce joy and with this courage, and it doesn't matter what trouble, what trial, what tribulation that he faces. I mean, nothing's gonna stop him. Why? Is it because he's so strong, he's so competent, he's so able? No. It's because he knows he has a great, big Jesus with him, and Jesus has got his back. And every single time David Ring preaches, every single message, he always ends the same way. Every single time he preaches, he closes his message by asking this question. He says, "I have cerebral palsy. What's your excuse?" No matter what problem you face, we have no excuse, because the Jesus that is watching over us is not a flannel graph figure. He is the Almighty Christ.